Jade, thank you so much for joining me today on Top of Mind. I am really looking forward to this conversation because we've started chatting before the mics started, and I was like, wait, let's wait till we're on. So thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me. We were already off to a good start. You couldn't shut us up.
We were. I was saying we needed like a pre-pod, then a pod. Where I want to start today though is you are a co-founder of a very successful business, Equalution, which a lot of people will be familiar with the other co-founder, Amal. Yeah. You founded a agency called Big Appetite, and you're now in the advisory space. I think there's a saying that comes to mind when I looked at your story and kind of followed your story, and it's like the whole saying of like winners never quit or quitters, never win. Yep. And I think there's something so wrong about that saying in my mind, because I think some of the best in the business know when to quit and they know when to walk away from something that's no longer serving them or aligned with where they want to be in life. So with your decision to step away from Equalution, how hard was that to make a decision like that?
I always say it was the best and hardest decision I've ever made all in one, and the funny thing is when I first made that decision to step away, I didn't actually know that I was exiting on the other side. I was simply, we just got to a point where, things weren't aligning from the top, and that's a big thing in business if you're in partnership. And I was evidently unhappy in my own self and my own life. That was a whole other thing in itself. And I just took some leave to figure it out, because for the first time ever, as someone that always had the answers, always was sure of themselves, always was leading, others, I had no clue what was next. I really felt very lost and almost like a loss of identity, because so much of my identity was tied to that business. Yeah. And I look at my life now and I think had I stayed, I'd still be that would still be my life, and I've lived a whole nother life since then. So I truly believe it was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, and you mentioned those kind of symptoms of feeling not happy and not yourself. How did those symptoms present themselves? Because I feel as though nowadays, even with burnout and stress and things like that, people will be like, I'm burnt out, but they're actually just going through a really kind of tough time at work, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So what was different in those symptoms that presented themselves that then forced you to be like, no, this actually isn't serving me?
I think where over the years I've been quite vocal about my own story, and I mean, the exit's something that could either be a thing of the past and just could fall in the shadows, or it could become part of, someone else's survival guide in the future. Is that, a lot of people, there's a lot of information out there about how to start a business. There's not a heck of a lot out there about what you should do when it's time to close that chapter. And to a big degree, I think there's a vast chunk of people who might sit in things longer past their expiry date than what their heart tells them to do so. And in honesty, I probably was 2 years past my expiry date as well, but I was so young. I started that business. We started that business at, 22 years old. That is a baby. I'm one of 5. My youngest brother's the same age now. And I just look at him and think, I was that age when I set out on this journey. Took a one-way ticket to Silicon Valley. Like there's a lot to be said for what maturity and experience gives you. And at that time, all I could go by was, I don't know what the next move is for someone that, as I said, always did, but things feel really wrong. Yeah. Things are not good. I'm not enjoying waking up every day. Some days are really hard to get out of bed. I'm not feeling aligned in the boardrooms anymore. I'm not feeling heard. I feel that the movements of the trajectory of this business is against my better judgment. There was just a lot of factors that were personal and commercial that to me just didn't feel right. And I think that's what it doesn't mean that, there's someone right and there's someone wrong or whatever. It was just my gut, which always led me really well up until then, was telling me, stop.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about your gut, like your gut is so important when it comes to making decisions. I think there was a study done where it was like relationships on paper versus relationships based on your gut feeling. Yep. Gut feeling lasted 80% longer than those relationships that were on paper. Now, you followed your gut to Silicon Valley. You deferred your uni degree. Yep. Did you ever go back to your uni degree?
No, but it was so funny because my dad even says to this day, "Oh, you ever go back and finish uni?" No, I think that is many moons ago now. No, I didn't go back.
Yeah.
And I don't think I will. I mean, it's a law degree. It's very distant from what I practice now, but
Absolutely.
I have a lot of respect for lawyers and they've served me really well, but I definitely don't think that is my career path.
Totally. Hey, just a quick one. If you are loving this episode, help us grow and reach more people by hitting the subscribe button and leaving a review. So when it comes to you moving to Silicon Valley, I think you said you were there for like 4 months.
Yep.
Before your money ran out.
Yep. and then we
then
came back home.
You came back home.
Yeah.
So when you came back to Australia, what did you come back with?
Nothing. Nothing but a big dream. And we did have active clients, which was good. We had an income. It wasn't like we were starting sort of from nothing, but it was just a bit of a wake-up call that, you know, we weren't kicking this off in America and doing that dream. It was definitely going to be done here and with the market that we knew the best. So we came back to Australia and just set out to grow and essentially be able to fund the app in turn.
Yeah. Okay. And for those of anyone that's listening or watching and they're not familiar with Equalution and what you guys do.
Yep.
Give us a elevator pitch of what that business does.
Okay. I'll give a little bit of history in it as well.
I love that.
I'll be short and sweet.
Love it.
But basically we were an online coaching business. We used to take the individual data of each person in terms of what their body needed for their goal, being fat loss, weight management, muscle gain. We used to work out the calories, protein, fats and carbs and then use foods that they loved to meet those in a personalized diet plan. So that was very manual from day dot. We used to do it all in MyFitnessPal and do all the calculations on an Excel spreadsheet. And then eventually we streamlined that into a mobile app experience, which to this day, you know, looks relatively the same, but has expanded more into sort of like the recipe domain. So there's a lot of macro-friendly recipes of all your favorites that are in app.
Yeah. And did you or Amal, when you started that business, I know both your backgrounds was kind of in that health and fitness space.
Yeah.
Did either of you two have like an in-depth knowledge of nutrition or anything like that?
No. And I think that was a bit of a running joke between us, you know, at the beginning and, you know, when things started to take off is that we started a nutrition company and did not have any nutrition backing. However, the minute we could hire, that was our first hire, that we brought in-house nutritionists and dietitians and whatnot to support our vision. But we actually worked alongside, he had a master's degree in nutrition and he worked with us at the very beginning stages and then we flew solo for a little bit and then we brought everything in-house, but the formulas kind of always stayed the same.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that I think of immediately with that is like building trust online is so important, right? And you guys obviously, like I know Amal had a huge weight transformation, you know, applying the principles that you guys have as part of Equalution. How did you build trust in a community when you guys were essentially just employing the skill set that you'd learned from somebody else?
Well, we'd built a brand and I think that was always the intention from the get-go and I think that was the real differentiator as well. We weren't influencers selling a booty guide or an ebook or something like that. We had built a brand off a credible system that actually worked and is evidence-based. So it wasn't a matter of a popularity contest or whatnot. The people kind of became our spokespeople and we built a community of raving fans and that was kind of always our strategy, being a faceless brand. It's a little bit different these days. You kind of go on, you know, Instagram and whatnot, you see some of the same faces and whatnot. But in the early days, it was definitely a community, customer-centric driven brand and it was all kind of people with the faces, our clients.
I love that. I think it's so interesting now because I think that, you know, there's so many people online that pretend to be, well, not pretend to be, but they think they're the experts, right? And I think that there's so much room for error when you're coming from a lens of I'm an expert in this space because there'll always be someone online that knows something more than you about something in a certain space. So I think branding and storytelling in terms of how you guys have done it is a really clever way to kind of build that community instead of just relying on like, I know the most about this in this space.
Definitely. And there's certainly a strategy that was implemented, but also going back to the root of the business, we were our first clients. So Amal lost 30 kilos, I lost 20 and we did it using these flexible dieting principles. Amal's journey was a little bit more, she adopted like a clean eating approach and it was sort of with the knowledge of flexible dieting that she was like, I wish I needed this, you know. And for me, it was the only thing that ever worked. So we kind of came from sort of two different perspectives of what this evidence-based method had given us, and sort of felt it was our God-given mission to share that with the world until it wasn't mine, sort of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, I want to quickly go back to you exiting. And I
Yeah.
know there's certain things that you can talk about and that you
Yep.
don't want to talk about, which is totally fine. But I think that when it comes to exiting, you said there's not much information out there in terms of
Yeah.
exiting a business. To be fair, there's not much information about starting businesses. So
Yeah.
there would be so little information out there when it comes to exiting a business. Where did you start?
It was really tricky. I think the first thing that happened was that one of my advisors sort of painted the grim picture of what the future could look like if I don't make a change, right?
Sure.
And this was someone that is really high up in business, and is a huge success. And I think that's who you should be led by, is people that are in a position where you hope to get to or aspire to get to, or they got more knowledge and experience than you. He was about 15 years my senior as well, which I think is really good to have someone that's seen a lot more than you have. And he was very for me leaving, and I couldn't quite fathom what that exactly looked like. And the first step was sort of just, think about what this means for you. Exiting can look different. You can, leave as as an employee. You can sit on the board. You can still have your stake.
Yeah.
You've got to decide, are you in or are you out type thing. And I just decided it was best just to, while we were where we were, just to
Clean cut.
to move on essentially. And I did have another vision at the time. So it wasn't, I was sort of like leaving with no direction. I had another app idea. And it's funny because I'm talking about 2021 at the moment. I only just got the check a month and a half ago. So it was
From exiting.
Yeah, it was a 3-year exit. And it's really funny because I think a lot of people think when you exit a company that there's just this big fat check waiting for you on the other side.
Not the case.
It's not the case at all. And I think that's something that I learned. And it was sort of like when I left, leaving a whole life behind me, freedom, all that kind of stuff, and started again. It was sort of like when I got to a point where I had done it again, then it came. So I think there was a lot of lessons that probably I needed to learn before I was rewarded or reaped the rewards, I guess, of that exit.
So 3 years.
Yeah.
Why did it take so long?
There was a lot of ups and downs. We had COVID that obviously impacted the investment process. We were subjects of investment fraud. So there was, some foul play from a opposed investor.
Okay.
So that took about 6 months there was 6 to 9 months of the deal, because once you sign with someone, you sign exclusivity. So that means you can't go, sell your shares elsewhere, talk about it or anything like that. You're in a deal with this person. So that kind of stole a bit of time. There was a few, various things that were speed humps in the road that, to be honest with you, the unfair thing about it was 95% were outside of my control. So, and that was the downside of leaving before the deal was done, So I think that was, it was very, very complex, and I'm really proud and happy that it's behind me now.
Absolutely. Hey guys, if you are listening on Spotify, don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the Q&A function on Spotify. And that emotionally must have worn on you, right? Like you're trying to start a new chapter, get on with your life, figure out what's next for yourself. But you've kind of got this gray cloud hanging over your head.
I think it was more the finality for me.
Sure.
That was difficult.
Yeah.
I think in terms of my life moving forward, it did that. It naturally did that. And I truly don't think had I not had that experience, it would have been so graceful to just move forward and be good at what I do. I really love what I do now, and I am really good at it. But had I not had that experience, I wouldn't be able to be, so knowledgeable and things like that in the position that I have. So I very much owe the Equalution experience to that. And I just kind of moved. I just kept moving. That's all you can do is just keep going. Yeah, there was some really rubbish days where I was just, dying for it to be over so I could move forward. But then, other great things happened in that time. There were other opportunities. I had a lot of wins, like runs on the board, which were great coming out of almost an identity crisis, because there was a part of me that was like, will this ever happen again?
Yeah.
In my one hit wonder, that was always my fear.
And so you mentioned you had some runs on the board. What are some runs on the board that you had post leaving Equalution?
Well, I started the agency and co-founded that immediately after. I would say probably about 5 months
Yeah.
after, and consulted in between then. And that was 7 figures in its first 12 months and, highly profitable, moved from a manual business into a software within the first 12 months. And so I could kind of see what had previously taken, 7 years was done in the first 12 months. And it was just a confidence I think that I needed,
Yeah.
getting back on the horse, which was really, really great. And then I think another really big pivot was just going out on my own. Like I had never had the confidence to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I could have done it after, straight after Equalution in the
Yeah.
agency domain, but I chose to go into a partnership, which was great and served its purpose. But then there was this like spurt of growth where I'm like, oh, it's time. It's time for you now to go out on your own.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing for someone that's always been in a partnership. And I believe in partnerships. I think they serve a great purpose, but seeing the full life cycle of one now, which is inevitable. It happens to every partnership.
Absolutely.
I think, you can sort of build a business model where you're supported in an advisory capacity or with the right team without that 50-50.
Yeah. And with that partnership, when that came to an end, obviously it wasn't a 3-year exit.
Yeah, no.
Did that naturally come to an end?
That was a walk in the park. It was literally just
like I've done this.
Yeah,
it was not going to take me 3 years. I'm going to be sweet.
Yeah, no, it was so fine. So basically in the agency, we sort of had 2, I guess, sectors of the business, and I sort of operated one and then Jenna operated the other. And naturally it was just sort of like, this would be mine and that would be yours. And we were we were sort of running like 2 different businesses under one umbrella sort of thing, which is what we were doing before we came together.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely gave us some exposure to new audiences and we kind of, grew together, and it was, like I said, an extra run on the board. But I was so ready for my own thing. And then obviously in my line of work in being advisory, that's where I sort of had the vision, and this has been an always vision for me, was to invest and have sort of like a venture arm of what I do, where I sort of do like a cash equity split, or I can, invest in some of the businesses that I'm working so closely with and investing so much of, my heart, soul and brain into as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you just took essentially the part that you were looking after and started your own business.
And the clients. Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so now, what does your normal week look like?
Oh gosh, I'm so busy. I'm really, I'm back to back most days. I actually got a really exciting call last week where the app idea that I did have when I was in Equalution, but I just wanted to make sure the exit was done and dusted. I didn't know what the exit would look like in terms of like, can I work in health and fitness? Like, is there, years restraints, etc. And fortunately there's not. And that was, I guess, one of the upsides of it taking 3 years. I've pretty much served that time. So I got some news last week that there will be a company that will be investing in my idea as the development partner.
Amazing.
So I'll be starting that really soon. So I think that'll be sort of like having a second job.
Yeah.
So I do advisory and do face-to-face consults, like online.
Yeah.
On a Monday to Friday basis. And then in my after hours, I'm usually working on, if I've got an equity investment in some of those businesses, might do like extra work outside of, our time together. And now I'll be building this on the side. So the weeks will be looking really.
And can you tell us anything about
the
new app?
Yes. It's a business management software for online coaches and personal trainers.
Okay. Amazing.
Yes.
And who would be using, obviously online coaches, but like what's the objective? What's different to what currently exists in market?
So what currently exists in the market is a range of white label solutions and also branded software that pretty much largely focuses on just being able to provide their end client training plans and a check-in ability and whatnot.
Sure.
But I'm sort of taking things into more sort of the business management space and allowing them to be able to use it sort of like as a CRM, get analytic stats and things like that from their dashboard, and really be able to like run the business how I advise people to run their business. So
that is so exciting. And when do you have like a goal of when you want it live?
Yeah, early next year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's sort of the target. So I go to Europe in July, which is really exciting. I call this era smelling the roses era.
Oh, I love that.
So yeah, that's what this time is kind of feeling like. So I go to Europe for July, and then I come back and start with them in August. So
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to it. I've done wireframes and things like that,
Yep.
so it was well prepped, ready to go.
Yeah.
So it should be a nice, swift build.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
so
you.
exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Stay tuned.
Yes.
So with that then, before we kind of wrap up the conversation about your exit and everything like that, if someone is in a business now and they're looking to exit in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, or they're looking to exit tomorrow, what is something that you wish you knew before you exited?
I think just to have a plan. There's nothing wrong with having an exit plan. It doesn't mean you're any less focused or driven or dedicated to your cause. It's just a matter of formalities, just having a bit of a plan in place or an understanding at least of what you want the future to look like, because exits can look really different. You can sell down, you can sit on the board, you can still run, there's a number of different avenues that you can exercise, which I think are sort of unknown territory when you first get into business. So I think just getting educated on what a business in its mature stages looks like, because that's another thing too. Like I always say, I'm a startup girl and I love that phase.
Yeah.
And I think there was something about that 8-year mark and probably what 8 to 20 might look like that, I didn't necessarily find as appealing. So in those stages, what do you do? Do you sit on a board? Do you still want to be part of the vision mission? And then I think just understanding naturally that, we grow, we evolve, we reinvent, and how will you adapt, to that? So I think just having a plan, that's something that I wish that I knew. And I think you have to be sort of receptive to hearing that. I remember we had an advisor and he's, highly respected in the tech space in health and fitness. And when he first started working with us, he was sort of like, what's your exit plan? That was one of his first questions. I was like, we were both like, we're not going anywhere,
Yeah.
But I just think that's great, that focus, but it's not a bad conversation to have at any time stage.
And it doesn't mean that you care any less.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I think
Not at all.
you're so right as well. Like, because I think when you get to that kind of 8 to 10 year mark, you're like, okay, cool. Am I staying here?
Yeah.
What's my next natural step?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now with Equalution, last question before we kind of move on from that space.
It's okay. It was a very important part of my life.
No,
So
and I think
like
it is important, but I think that there's so much more value that you have to offer than just talking about a business that you co-founded.
Yeah.
So my last question on it, when you came back from the US, and you were like, right, let's start marketing this. You were talking about the fact that you and Amal were already kind of case studies for the fact that it worked. How did you start marketing it? Like, how did you start getting it out there? How did you start getting the word out there? Because I know that you bootstrapped the whole thing, which means for anyone that doesn't know that you haven't had any investors in that. You've used all your own money to build it. How do you market a product or a service like that from the beginning?
So in the very, very early stages, we knew the power of the transformation and the result, because our service was evidence-based. It did work and it did have that point of difference. So all the ducks were in a row. We knew how we differentiated to what else was on the market. At the time, we were in a space where clean eating was the social phenomenon. People were trying to work out, how little they could eat or how small they could eat of the things that they actually loved and all that kind of stuff. It was very heavily focused on restriction. So we sort of knew our position. We knew that we offered something different and I guess an avenue of freedom. And we sort of used that in our marketing message. But more than anything, people want to see that it works. And so we just curated as many of those results as absolutely possible. Our mum's friends, my sister, anyone that would listen, we did their transformation, or we serviced them free of charge in exchange for their transformation. And then as we sort of matured in business, that sort of did, replicate in other ways in our marketing strategy as well. We had influencer partnerships and we really didn't do paid posts or anything along those lines. It was really just outreach. And, we know you're really into your health and fitness and you've got a goal at the moment, we'd love to help. And they would be like, yeah, we'll give it a go. And they shared with their audience. And then we started to incentivize user-generated content. So our community creating their own accounts, sharing images of their food and things like that, grocery vouchers, etc. So we really just ensured that the word was spread loud and clear. Yeah. Referral programs, Some people used to even treat the referral program like a game. You know, if they stack their chips, they can get a half price service or something like that.
So good.
So yeah, it was really, I think they're things that, you know, have a bit more light now, but at the time we were just sort of snowballing what was working for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And what didn't work for you guys? Is there anything that you tried in that period that you were like, oh, we won't do that again?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. Paid marketing was always a bit of a, you know, a roller coaster.
Yep.
2020, it was our first relationship with it, and it was great. And then it didn't quite do the same thing in 2021, you know, so it was always, and that's an area that, you know, I'm not hugely knowledgeable on. I would say I'm no expert or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we always left that to an expert. And it was, it just, to me, it always seemed like there was some unexplained trends and things like that, which organic, we always had a finger on the pulse. We knew exactly why things were working. So I think, paid marketing was the only thing I felt really disconnected from.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Fair enough. Thanks for listening. If you loved this conversation, don't forget to tune in to our next episode to hear part 2. Don't forget to review and subscribe if you are loving this content.